Russia had some favorable factors like continental size and vast resources like in the case of America, but it had some limitations like climatic factors, excessive cold in many regions, and dearth of individual capital and feudal nature of society. So these were barriers. Russia में there are certain problems. I'll discuss those first. Firstly, the problem is of the market. If you look at a map of Russia, those things which goes, that area which goes closer to the Baltic nations, St. Petersburg, आपको पता है सब? Do you remember the maps of the world? Geography पढ़ा है बेसिक ना? So St. Petersburg के उस तरफ जो region है, लाटविया की तरफ, एस्टोनिया की तरफ, that was the most industrialized region of Russia because of its closeness to Baltic Sea, and it was industrialized and commercialized. It was also closer to Europe, but the main zone, the agrarian basket, was in Ukraine. यूक्रेन जो कि नीचे आता है वो रशिया का एग्रेरियन बास्केट है प्रोडक्शन के लिए. देन यू गो टू वो जहाँ पे आज डिबेट चल रहा है ना, वो काराबाख का, अजरबैजान एंड आर्मेनिया, दैट रीजन वाज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर माइनिंग. देन यू गो टू सेंट्रल एशिया, दैट रीजन वाज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर and other local products. And then you go to Siberia, वो तो बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ फर ही थी और ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं था वहाँ पे. So we have 5 different regions in Russia. The northwest का इंडस्ट्रियल कॉम्प्लेक्स, यूक्रेन दिशा का रीजन, यूराल्स वाला रीजन, सेंट्रल एशिया एंड साइबेरिया साइड. And all these 5 regions have 5 different types of economies. All these 5 regions are more intimately connected to their neighboring region than to each other. जैसे यूक्रेन वुड बी मोर कनेक्टेड टू ऑटोमन एम्पायर, उसके साथ ट्रेड चलेगा उसका लेन देन का. यूरल्स वुड बी मोर कनेक्टेड विथ पर्शिया, साइबेरिया मोर विथ चाइना साइड. तो इनमें आपस में क्या बात है? कुछ नहीं है. रशिया बड़ा है, रशिया इज अ बिग कंट्री, इट्स लाइक अ पाइथन. जैसे कहते हैं पाइथन हुज हेड इज इन यूरोप एंड रेस्ट ऑफ द बॉडी इज इन एशिया, इट्स रशिया. तो एंड इट इज़ वेरी कल्चरली इम्पोर्टेंट. रशिया के अंदर एक स्प्लिट पर्सनैलिटी है बाय द वे. रशिया चाहती है हम स्लाव है या वेस्टर्नाइजर है, जैसे हमारे यहाँ भी है ना, इंडिया में भी है, वी वांट टू बिकम वेस्टर्नाइज और नॉट, या देसी, तो उस तरह वहाँ भी है. बट एनीवे, सो वी हैव दिस 5 डिफरेंट इकोनॉमिक जोन्स विच आर डिस्कनेक्टेड फ्रॉम ईच अदर. देयर इज नो नेशनल सिंगल कॉमन मार्केट एंड ऑल दीज जोन्स हैव कनेक्शन विद देयर नेबरिंग रीजन्स विच आर मोर इंटेंस दैन टू ईच अदर. उसके बीचों बीच क्या पड़ता है? मॉस्को. अब मॉस्को could have emerged as center of economy. The problem was that the communication with Moscow was not easy. रास्ते नहीं थे, बर्फ पड़ता था, कनाल फ्रोजन हो जाता था 6-6 महीने के लिए, 4-4 महीने के लिए. How do you communicate? How do you create a national integration? Before railway, it was not possible. So till the midst of the 19th century, end of 19th century almost, रशिया में कुछ नहीं था. They were very backward and they did not care. वो क्या करना है करके आराम करो अपना अपना. But in 1850s, the war happened. That war was Crimean War. In the Crimean War, on behalf of Ottomans, we have British and French fighting with Russians. we have to see the Crimea. हम क्रीमिया को देखेंगे बाद में डिटेल में. In that war, Russians were defeated and brutally defeated. अब उनको लगा करना क्या है? वी हैव टू डू समथिंग, वी विल गेट डिफीटेड इन आर्मी. अपना बैकवर्डनेस इज एक्सपोज टू द वर्ल्ड एंड हमारे दुश्मन कुड गो अहेड बिकॉज दे हैड इंडस्ट्रीज. वी डोंट हैव इंडस्ट्री. में इंडस्ट्री लाई चाहिए. इंडस्ट्री आएगी कहाँ से? रातों रात. तो एंटायर रशियन एलीट नाउ गॉट पजेस्ड विद द भूत कि हमें इंडस्ट्री चाहिए. कहाँ से आएगी? दे हैव दैट रिलेशन ओनली इन 1860s. दे zeroed in on one single problem: we don't have a cheap labor. क्योंकि we still have serfdom. Serfdom continued in Russia till 1860s. It was Alexander who in 1860s gradually abolished serfdom. But he abolished it in such a way, his thought was that कि उससे free labor बनेगा तो industry आएगी. But it did not happen because he abolished in a very complicated manner. What did he do? उसने कहा feudal lords को कि मैं आपको गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से पैसा दूंगा, सर्फ को छोड़ दो. कंपेंसेशन है. लॉर्ड्स वेर ओके. सर्फ को क्या बोला? you don't have skill, now you are free. तो लॉर्ड का एक तिहाई हिस्सा अब आपको मिलेगा, 1/3 ऑफ द लैंड ऑफ द फ्यूडल लॉर्ड विल बी विद सर, इट इज कॉल्ड मीर. आप उस मीर पे अपने खुद के लिए किसानी करो, खेती करो, उससे जो पैसा आएगा उस पैसे से सरकार को पे बैक कर दो of compensation money that we have upfront paid to the feudal lord. So government paid to the feudal lord upfront, and government expected the free peasant now to pay it back. Compensation cost over next 49 years. 50 साल आप दोबारा मेहनत करो तो 50 साल तक वो would not go back. So peasant was technically free, not actually free, because for the 50 years उसको गवर्नमेंट ऑफ रशिया का लोन चुकाना था, सबके फ्रीडम के पैसे दे रहे थे. So it also failed. But anyway, my point is that Russia had faced different climatic, geographic, socio-political conditions, and the path it undertook was very different. In Russia, you see the extremely important role of state. They want to catch up, but it is not in the 19th century. We have one interesting attempt in the 18th century itself, quite early, by Peter the Great. It was a faint attempt of industrialization and modernization. Peter the Great was एक अवलिया इंसान था, बड़ा राजा था, but अवलिया राजा था. He was there before the enlightenment. सबका राजा ही. Beginning of 18th century, 1705, 1710 की बात है. वो he was fascinated by westernization. उसने कहा पूरे देश को वेस्टर्न बना देंगे, बहुत हो गया, हम पिछड़े पड़े, लेट अस कॉपी एंटायर वेस्ट. उनकी इंडस्ट्री मुझे पसंद है, शिप बिल्डिंग इंडस्ट्री सच अ ग्रेट इंडस्ट्री. सो वो खुद भेस बदल के by changing his own cloth and out attire secretly went to Dutch region. He worked there, he observed there, and then he got the knowledge. He sent many engineers, he purchased many people from there. कुछ करके इंडस्ट्री खड़ी करनी है, मतलब खड़ी करनी. So he tried, he established some armaments with the slave labor, shipbuilding industry. In other areas also state-run factories to produce iron and copper, etc. He did some things, but ultimately it failed. But he did not only industrialization thing, he did lot of other things also. जैसे कभी एक बार वेस्ट यूरोप में गया था. इन द वेस्ट यूरोप वहाँ पे एक बड़ी मज़ेदार कहानी है. आफ्टर रिसेंट कोलम्बियन एक्सचेंज इन द वेस्ट यूरोप, टोबैको हैड बिकम वेरी फैशनेबल. तंबाकू खाना, इसको लत लग गई तंबाकू, बोला क्या बढ़िया चीज़ है. तो व्हेन ही केम बैक, ही फोर्स्ड इन, पूरे दरबार में सबको तंबाकू खाना कंपलसरी है. क्यों? वेस्ट विल, हमें, वी हैव टू बिकम लाइक वेस्ट, वेस्ट इट्स तंबाकू, हम भी तंबाकू खाएंगे आज से. तो राजा तंबाकू खा रहे, दरबार में बैठे बैठे सबको दरबारियों को तंबाकू खाओ. ही नॉट इवन दैट, ही imposed a new tax on the people to cultivate more and more tobacco and all those things. Then he said दाढ़ी, ऐसे मेरी दाढ़ी बढ़ी. Russia had a lot of Mongol culture influence. बोले ना ना, we are not eastern, we are western. हम तो वहाँ पे है, तो हमें ईस्टर्न कल्चर का, तो मंगोल अटायर, मंगोल टाइप दाढ़ी, इफ यू वांट टू कीप. एक तो कानूनन मना था कि आप अब से मंगोलियन कपड़े नहीं पहनेंगे, आप वेस्टर्न कपड़े पहनेंगे. विल नॉट हैव द दाढ़ी लाइक मंगोल, आपको दाढ़ी हटानी पड़ेगी, मूछ हटानी पड़ेगी. कानून लाया सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने. क्यों? क्योंकि यू हैव टू बी वेस्टर्नाइजर एंड नॉट लाइक ईस्ट. तो इनहेरेंट रशिया के अंदर ना वो एक फ्लॉ है. दे हैव स्ट्रगल कि हम एशियन है कि यूरोपियन है. एंड देयर हैव बीन लॉट ऑफ मूवमेंट्स. रशिया का एस्पिरेशन इज टू बिकम यूरोपियन, बट इट्स डेस्टिनी इज टू रिमेन इन एशिया. तो बेचारा कुछ कर, स्प्लिट पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर उनको है, वो क्या करेंगे. तो एनीवे, सो वी हैव द इनिशियल स्पर्ट, इनिशियल अटेम्प्ट्स, फ्लिकरिंग ऑफ अटेम्प्ट्स बाय पीटर द ग्रेट, बट दे डिड नॉट सक्सीड. कुछ होगा ही नहीं वहाँ पे, एक आदमी से थोड़ी होता है. यू नीड एंटायर सोशल चेंज फॉर दैट. देन यू हैव एक्चुअल इंडस्ट्री स्टार्टिंग इन द 19th century, especially in the midst of the 19th century. So in the actual sense, industrialization in Russia started in 19th century under Russian Emperor Tsar Alexander II. His financial expert Sergei Witte took the initiative for industrialization, and this industrialization is based on the model. That model is called as Gerstenkron model. Now Gerstenkron was a professor in Oxford or somewhere in the US, maybe, I don't remember, some western country in 1950s, 1960s. उसने एक इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ मॉडल दिया है. दैट मॉडल इज कॉल्ड एज गर्शन-क्रोन मॉडल. होता क्या है? सिंपल थिंग. व्हाट ही सेज इज दैट फॉर द लेट कमर कंट्रीज, जो देर से जगे है कंट्रीज, इंग्लैंड के बाद they have some challenges and they have some opportunities, which differentiates their pattern of industrialization from the industrialization of other countries like England, the first countries, and they have to develop their own model. Challenges क्या है? Lack of some factors of production, like active, like for example, lack of positive labor, lack of free labor, lack of capital with the individuals. Because you don't have those things, you have to overcome those things. Therefore, you have to remain dependent on state to take positive and active role. So state role becomes important to compensate for the lack of the factors of production. और आपको जल्दी जाना है. That is one important point. So state role is important. For example, he says infrastructure नहीं है, skilled labor नहीं है, and capital. These three basic: infrastructure, skilled labor, and capital. Because you lack these three specific things, state has to provide them. And secondly, therefore, you cannot go for laissez-faire. You have to go for protectionism. And what are the opportunities you have? Like opportunity to adopt latest technology without having to undergo experiment. अब Britain ने क्या किया? Britain took by this time, by 1850, 1870, etc. ब्रिटेन में IR शुरू होकर 100 साल हो गए. They experimented. चलो एक टेक्नोलॉजी मिल गई, अच्छा इससे फायदा होगा, खड़ी करो इंडस्ट्री. करोड़ों पैसे लगा दिए, इंडस्ट्री बना दी, उसका आउटपुट आ रहा है. जब तक वो आउटपुट आना शुरू हो जाए, इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉफिटेबल कन्वर्ट हो, उसके पहले कहीं और इन्वेंशन हो गया. अरे यार, ये करते तो शायद जल्दी होता. अभी इंडस्ट्री आउटडेटेड, पैसा बर्बाद, अब नया इंडस्ट्री लगाओ. सो ब्रिटेन के केस में दे हैड टू गो फॉर लॉट ऑफ एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन, ट्रायल्स एंड एरर्स टू रीच अ मैच्योर लेवल. बट इन केस ऑफ लेट कमर्स, दे हैव दैट नॉलेज ऑलरेडी इन फ्रंट ऑफ देम. बना बनाया, बस कॉपी करो, लगाओ, शुरू करो. सो दे डोंट हैव टू री इन्वेंट द व्हील ऑफ डिस्कवरीज एंड इन्वेंशन, इनोवेशन सब हो चुका है. बट problem is that now the discovery and innovations are no more simple ones, they are highly scientific, so they are very capital intense. Again the state roles come in, state's role come in. ठीक है, फर्क समझ में आ रहा है? So you have the challenges because you lack factors of production like capital, infrastructure and labor, skilled labor. In case of opportunity, you don't have to go for experimentation, trial and error. You can learn from the mistakes of the others and directly आप शुरू कर. जैसे आज के दिन में अगर अफ्रीका की, if there is some African country which today starts industrialization, it wants mobile network, will it start with 1G or 2G? नहीं, it will start with 4G or 5G. But India, which started earlier, has been through 1G and 2G and 3G and 4G. तो हमें हर बार इन्वेस्टमेंट नए से करनी पड़ी, खर्चा हो गया. It was not, it was huge investment. हर जगह सब चेंज करो, आसान थोड़ी है हर 10 साल में सब चेंज करना. तो उनका फायदा नहीं हुआ, उनका लॉस बच गया. Late comers have some advantage and they have some disadvantages, and because of both advantages and disadvantages, ultimately the role of state becomes primary. That is the concept of Darshan Krop, and he is talking about it in 1950s, 1960s, matlab at the height of Cold War. So he is trying to say to the Western intellectuals कि भाई देखो, in countries like India, the state is having leading role in planning. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है India is becoming communist. वो उसका कॉन्टेक्स्ट उस तरफ. बट एनीवे, features of Russian industrialization. Russia's vast landmass was rich in natural resources such as coal, iron ore, and timber. The availability of these resources provided a strong foundation, but also hampered by a number of obstacles like large peasant population, lack of infrastructure, and weak government. As a result, it lagged behind other countries. So state played a major role because middle class was not strong. State played a major role through planning, implementing, producing, and as a consumer through policies, tariff, and subsidies. So at all these levels, state had to play an important role. State also played a key role in developing infrastructure such as railroad and canal. Most important thing, everywhere in second IR, the most important thing will always be railway. A takeoff period, takeoff word is Rostov, railway. तो यहाँ पे कौन सी रेलवे है? ट्रांस साइबेरियन रेलवे. इन अमेरिका वी हैव ट्रांस कॉन्टिनेंटल रेलवे. यहाँ पे यू हैव ट्रांस साइबेरियन रेलवे. ट्रांस साइबेरियन रेलवे इज सच अ ह्यूज इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. that for both backward and forward, and connecting all these different economies to each other to create a national market, domestic market, played a huge role. Trans-Siberian economy, Trans-Siberian railway. In order to mobilize the resources, the state imposed heavy taxation on peasantry. To kickstart industrialization, Russia relied on foreign capital and expertise. स्टेट ने खुद दुनिया भर से कर्जा उठाया और अपने इन्वेस्ट कर दिया. Then, in the dearth of individual capital, the state played a role of investor in order to fulfill the need for investment, took loans even from abroad. And Russia imported technology and industrial methods from Western Europe. The TOT, transfer technology, accelerated the industrialization process. So you have again the same thing we have seen, except for education, which is not here, and addition of heavy tax on peasant, because Russia did not have the agricultural revolution. ये दो चीजें अलग है, और it is as same as America. Here you have emphasis on big and heavy industry. So ये भी specific चीज है that you focus on the capital goods more. Russian industrialization was the concentration of industry in a few key sectors such as heavy industry, mining and oil drilling. This concentration of industry was partly due to the government's emphasis on developing these sectors and partly due to the fact that these sectors were most profitable. Now, what is specific here, a very important point, is that because of its climate, because of its nature, because of the capital goods industry, very few cities and latecomer, all those things, Russian factories typically were much larger than the factories in the West. In single factory, for example, at an average, more than 500 workers were employed in Russian industries. Russian factories were large industrial complex. Factories, RIES. What is the point I'm trying to make here? The point is that there is huge concentration of labor in some pockets of Russia. And that is important for the spread of class consciousness. In Britain, for example, एक फैक्ट्री में 50, 60, 70 लोग काम करेंगे, यहाँ पे 700, 800, 1000, 10,000 लोग काम करेंगे. Strike becomes more possible. Labor strike, labor problems, labor are much more concentrated. It has a huge impact on the course of history. So impact, working class, activities of working classes were confined to small regions. Again, you see Russian Revolution, very important. Revolution हुई, उसके बाद लोगों ने उसको माना नहीं. After Russian Revolution, there was Russian Civil War, went on for long time, many months. In that, the revolutionary forces suppressed and killed hundreds and thousands of more people जो अपोज करते revolution को. क्यों करते थे? क्योंकि they had not seen industrialization. वो अलग जमाने में रहते थे. So concentration of industry is only in some pockets, and even in those pockets, you have huge worker concentration, high density. So that led to growing consciousness of workers. That is a typical pattern you find in Russia, not anywhere else. Due to heavy taxation, peasants were offended, so they joined the revolution initially. And the Russian middle class was in weak position in Russia, and whenever there was a rise of Communist Party, the middle class could not counter the communist movement in Russia. Unlike in Germany or to a large extent in England, strength of middle class is a very important phenomenon. जितना middle class strong, उतनी workers movement को आप दबा दोगे. In case of Russia, the bourgeois were extremely tiny क्योंकि bourgeois नहीं थे, इसीलिए state आई थी. State actually compensated the lack of presence of bourgeois. So when the communist movement started, उनको रुकेगा कौन? In 1905 we have a revolution. In 1917 we have the first revolution of March. In both these cases, bourgeois could have gotten ahead and they would have consolidated the power, but नहीं कर पाए. तो अक्टूबर रिवॉल्यूशन होती है, मार्च अक्टूबर की 1917 में सेकंड रिवॉल्यूशन, तब जाके कम्युनिस्ट रिवॉल्यूशन होती है. And then we have some points. The industrialization did not stop after 1917 and Civil War, rather it continued after Civil War with even increased pace. Now we have the planning, 5 years plan start from 1920s onwards, and then we have a new pattern of industrialization emerging. Since it was based on communist ideology, no profit orientation, no property rights, it's a different kind of industrialization. No role of market forces. You have machines were initially imported, later on they were manufactured locally. Capital goods were again, capital goods को पता नहीं इंडिया में भी कहो, रशिया में कहो, you see latecomers generally focus a lot on capital goods industry. Then the pace was very high after 1921. Within a period of less than 3 decades, Soviet Union emerged as an industrial superpower, and the worker class exploitation was much less in USSR because it was a communist country. So you have these specific factors. समझ में आया?